Hello, everybody. My name is Maurice Button. I'm the CEO of City and Financial Global, and it's my great pleasure to be interviewing Bill Winters, Group CEO of Standard Chartered. Bill is going to be speaking at City Week, which is being held at Guildhall in London between the 24th and the 26th of April, and specifically around the subject of voluntary carbon markets regulation and legitimacy. Bill, welcome.
Thanks, Maurice. Thanks for having me.
Let's turn to the questions, if we may. Back in November 2020, the Task Force on Scaling Voluntary Carbon Markets, which you chair, set out its blueprint. What progress has been made since then, and what are the principal challenges that it has faced in delivering on its vision over the last couple of years?
Good. So the mission, just to remind everybody of the task force, was to get a group of participants in the carbon market coming from all angles. So these were emitters, carbon credit buyers, intermediaries, academics, NGOs, to bring us together and address what in the question form is quite straightforward, which is how do we restore a full level of confidence to the quality of carbon credits that are traded in the market? And then subsidiary question, how do we make sure that there's a governance framework in place so that high quality can be sustained indefinitely, permanently? The task force, we had about 450 participants, 250 different organizations represented, and it really did cover the full range. Came up with a reasonably, but not very detailed approach to how we would answer the quality question. How do we set standards that can be applied globally that would give anybody who buys a credit that is complying with those standards confidence that they're actually removing carbon from the environment or preventing carbon from being introduced to the environment. And we separately put together a governance framework, which included an independent board of directors, so made up entirely of people who don't have direct market participation, with a couple of exceptions. Out of a 22-person board, we had 3 people representing participants from the market, 19 who were completely independent. That board of directors, which would be the ultimate decision maker around the key questions of standards and quality, would be supported by an expert panel, which had 2 co-heads, 4 core principles, and then 20 or 25 others, I say recognized world-class experts, typically with a very strong academic and or policy background, to adjudicate and advise on quality matters. The good news is that's all happened. So the standard setting body is up and running. The board is thoroughly composed. The expert panel has been operating very diligently. They put out a set of guidelines for a consultation document for the nature of the standards that would be promoted. We've gotten really good feedback, very helpful feedback on that. We've indicated that the intention is to publish the final set of standards in March, so in a bit over a month, and that we would begin to actually offer accreditation, sort of policy by policy, by the 3rd quarter of this year. So hard work, lots of people very focused on this, plenty of controversy around the way, both from within the process, but also outside, because it's not an easy exam question. But the progress at this point is very good, and we're just about live.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, that's great progress, isn't it? And that body, I suppose, is the Integrity Council for Voluntary Carbon Markets that you were referring to there, and
That's
putting
right.
out its sort of consultation document. In your view, what are going to be the chief challenges with accrediting these projects and making sure that the carbon credits really meet the criteria?
Yeah, I think there are a few things that have, I think, been relatively straightforward throughout, and there are some things that are quite thorny. The thorniest, I think, by far, is how we deal with the question of, in technical terms, these REDD+ projects. So forest or other nature preservation projects, where there's some credit generated by virtue of protecting things that would otherwise be destroyed. And that it raises a lot of questions. One is, would it have been destroyed? And would that forest have been cut down? If so, at what pace? And second, how do you know that there's actual compliance, especially if law enforcement on the ground is not in a position to adjudicate? And third, what good are these things anyway if natural disasters come along and burn down a forest or something to that effect? So that's been one of the most controversial elements of the voluntary carbon market since these markets were created 30 or 35 years ago. We think we've got some pretty good methodologies to address those questions. First is developing consensus around the science of determining what would likely have happened to this piece of nature had there not been a carbon credit project involved. I think we've through years of experience, we've refined our understanding of that, although it will remain contentious because you can't tell for sure what would have happened. It's the counterfactual. Second is in terms of the ongoing verification of the thing to which the parties have agreed in terms of generating the offset in the first place. The surveillance and monitoring techniques have advanced dramatically. The use of satellite imagery, the use of on-the-ground sensors, the willingness of countries who are participating in the voluntary carbon market to allow the kind of supervision that will give confidence that projects are on track has improved dramatically. And I think there's a growing and established set of standards around monitoring and surveillance that will help to build confidence. And third, there will be natural disasters. There will be forest fires. We know that. And you just have to build enough of a buffer in up front. And I think for the most part, that's been done on the existing contracts. But I think we'll also establish some standards on what's an appropriate buffer to build in for natural carbon leakage that you would expect just through the natural course of events. So that's just maybe too much detail on one specific example, but it is one of the big ones in terms of the creation of carbon credits. One that I think the group has struggled with most directly and taken extensive consultations. As with anything that's challenging, I wouldn't expect that there to be 100% acceptance of every term at the outset. But hopefully we can get to the point where we can start to get real money moving into the hands of people that can actually keep carbon out of the environment. And that we have to remind ourselves from time to time, that is why we're doing this. It's not to achieve some level of academic perfection. It's to get very, very, very good and have a very, very, very material impact on getting carbon out of the environment.
Yeah, a very comprehensive approach. I mean, turning to the sort of supply and demand side, given the exponential increase in the number of climate commitments being made by corporates and financial institutions, do you think that the supply of carbon credits can keep up with demand, particularly given the additional scrutiny that they're going to face, given the improved standards that you're going to be bringing in?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, and I think it's important, I think, to note that the Integrity Council and the board have not had the objective of making the market big. They've had the objective of instilling confidence in the market. And the view is that if we instill confidence, there will be plenty of projects that we can demonstrate quite clearly are contributing to the reduction of climate in the environment. So the first and foremost is let's get the quality right, the volume will follow. Will there be enough projects? Yeah, there will be enough projects. And it's not just protecting existing nature reserves or establishing new nature reserves through reforestation or the like. There's some really interesting things have happened just in the past several months, like the JETP for Indonesia, the Just Energy Transition Plan, which is, as you know, G7 countries working together individually with countries who are still developing to come up with a carbon mitigation plan with assistance from the one or more of the G7 countries. And very importantly, in the Indonesia JETP, for example, is a provision to retire existing coal-fired power plants before the end of their useful life, 10 or 15 years before they would otherwise be retired. And the way to pay for that early retirement, obviously that power has to be replaced, is to originate carbon credits that would be sold in the market linked to that project. So that's not obviously protecting rainforests or building or planting new forests. That's stopping the emissions that would otherwise carry on for another 25, 30, 40, 50 years in some cases, and using carbon credits as the medium of exchange. That to me is an excellent example of, we could all recognize that that's a good thing. Right? So it's a good thing to do to decommission these coal-fired power plants earlier than would be the case otherwise. It's a good thing to replace that with renewable power because Indonesia is growing quite rapidly and has a young and a relatively underpowered population that will need power for decades to come. We can't tell them they have to stop growing. So this is all going in the right direction. The medium of exchange is carbon credits. And I think we'll find that there are more and more applications for relatively innovative or at least new solutions to this climate change problem that involve carbon credits as a medium of exchange of one form or other.
Excellent. So an expanding range of sources of carbon credits. Turning to the infrastructure of this market, I mean, it's going to be a very large market. Where do you think you are in terms of getting the trading and post-trade infrastructure, the financial innovations, the availability, I suppose, of sufficiently granular data to enable this market to work efficiently?
Yeah, another really good question. And yeah, we can observe that the market today, the carbon market, is very fragmented. There are literally dozens of different government-run markets now, or compliance markets, around the world, each running their own infrastructure with very little interoperability between them. There are also several different voluntary carbon markets, and while the voluntary carbon market itself isn't a marketplace, it's a term for sets of activities. We know that those transactions are executed in many different ways. Some of the voluntary carbon market transactions are being executed via established exchanges, but for the most part they're new and they're not connected globally. So Standard Chartered has been involved in, I think, a very important one in Singapore called Climate Impact X, or CIX, which is initially focused on nature-based solutions, but will broaden out. It is broadening out beyond the narrow form of carbon credit, with a view to creating transparency in the marketplace. So it's having a transparent set of execution mechanisms, but also price, reinforcing the quality criteria that are coming from the Integrity Council for the Voluntary Carbon Market. So that's a core underlying principle for CIX. And I would hope that over time, as other of these exchanges, we've also participated in the setup of an exchange in Hong Kong, which will be a little bit more focused on credits that buying and selling in and out of mainland China. There are obviously futures markets that exist in London and Chicago. So there's a proliferation of marketplaces for different types of credits. I would hope that through time, that the quality standards that are established by the ICVCM are embedded across these markets, and that once the quality standards are clear, that would also allow for some interoperability between those markets, so that we could begin to get a consistent price signal, as well as a consistent execution framework, so that we get a little bit more liquidity, visible liquidity in these markets, to complement the transparency and confidence.
Fantastic. I mean, it sounds as though it is all coming together and accelerating forward. So thank you very much for your time today, Bill. I'd love to discuss this in further depth, but of course we'll have the opportunity at City Week, which I hope our viewers will be able to attend between the 24th and 26th of April. And the Climate Change, Green Finance and Sustainability Day is the first day of that on the 24th of April. So it only remains for me to thank you very much, Bill, for your time and sharing those insights.
Thank you, Morris.
Perfect. Okay.